My husband made me get 2 jobs to help with the bills, only for me to discover the money was going straight to another woman and the 2 children he was hiding in another city. One day he traveled. When he returned, he had a surprise. My name is Emily, I'm 38 years old, and I was married to Mark for 15 years. Our apartment was small but cozy. I decorated every corner with care, believing we were building a home, not just occupying a space. Mark liked to surprise me with flowers on Fridays. I prepared his favorite dish on Sundays. We were happy, or at least I thought we were. The problem was that his plans always came first. His career was the absolute priority in our life. When he got the position of regional manager at a large pharmaceutical company, the trips began. Initially, it was once a month, then every 2 weeks. Eventually, Mark was spending almost an entire week away from home every 2 weeks. "It's temporary," he would say, kissing my forehead before catching another flight. "Soon I'll be promoted and won't need to travel so much. I'm doing this for us, for our dreams." And I believed him. How could I not believe someone who looks into your eyes with such conviction? How could I doubt the man who vowed eternal love in a seaside chapel, surrounded by our families? Meanwhile, I was building my own career as a nurse in a public hospital. Exhausting shifts, sleepless nights, difficult patients, emergencies had no set time, and how many times did I cancel plans because someone needed urgent care? But I loved my job, despite all the difficulties. It was gratifying to be able to help people in their most vulnerable moments. I remember one patient in particular, Mrs. Wilson, elderly, alone, without family. She would hold my hand during procedures as if I were her daughter. "You have a gift, girl," she would say. "Not everyone can make other people's pain seem lighter." Mrs. Wilson passed away during one of my shifts. I held her hand until her last breath. I cried in the locker room after declaring her death. I came home destroyed that night. Mark was home, a rarity at that time. "You look terrible," he commented, barely lifting his eyes from his laptop. I told him about Mrs. Wilson, about how that death had affected me. "Emily, you need to be more professional. You can't be this shaken by every patient you lose. Imagine if I felt bad every time a deal didn't work out." That was the first time I realized the abyss that was beginning to form between us. How could you compare the loss of a human life to a business deal gone wrong? But I swallowed the comment along with my tears. Maybe he was right. Maybe I needed to be stronger. The years went by, and the distance between us increased, not just physically, but emotionally. His trips became longer, the calls shorter. When he was home, Mark spent more time with his phone in his hands than talking to me. I tried everything: romantic dinners, weekends at charming inns, even new lingerie that spent more time in the drawer than on my body. Until one day, Mark came home with a serious expression. "Emily, we need to talk about money." We sat at the kitchen table while he opened his laptop, showing a detailed spreadsheet of our expenses. Every grocery purchase, every bill paid, every small luxury I had allowed myself, like that new lipstick or the book I bought to read during breaks at the hospital. "Look at this," he pointed to the screen. "Our expenses have increased 30% in the last year. We won't be able to buy the beach house we've always wanted at this rate." The beach house, that dream that was more his than mine, but which I had bought into over the years. A house in Malibu, with a view of the sea and space to host friends and family. A dream that was mentioned so many times that it became concrete in my mind, even though it had never gone beyond conversations and occasional searches on real estate websites. "But Mark, we're financially stable. We don't have debts. We can pay all the bills." "It's not enough, Emily," he interrupted. "We need to save more. Or rather, you need to earn more." That caught me by surprise. "Me? But I already work full-time at the hospital." "Yes, but at your job you have days off. You could use that time to do something useful, earn some extra money." "Days off? You call the days when I'm not on a 12-hour shift days off? The days when I need to rest?" Mark rolled his eyes as if I were being dramatic, a gesture that became increasingly common in our conversations. "Emily, I work much harder than you. I travel constantly. I'm always solving company problems, including on weekends. You don't know what real tiredness is." Those words hurt more than any physical aggression could. How dare he say I didn't know what tiredness was? Me, who had done double shifts to cover for sick colleagues. Me, who held the hands of terminal patients in the lonely early hours at the hospital. Me, who had performed resuscitation maneuvers for more than an hour, with aching arms and a racing heart, fighting to bring someone back to life. "Mark, that's not fair. My work is physically and emotionally exhausting." "Exhausting? Please, Emily. You stay there chatting with patients, writing things on clipboards. That's not real work. Real work is what I do. Negotiations, stressful trips, important meetings." That was the first time I realized that he had absolutely no respect for what I did. For Mark, my profession was something lesser, insignificant compared to the grandeur of the corporate empire where he worked, as if saving lives were less important than selling medicine. "So, what do you think about looking for a second job? Maybe at a private clinic, or even as a babysitter on weekends?" "A babysitter? Mark, I've been a trained nurse for 15 years. Exactly. You have experience with children. It would be easy to find families willing to pay well. I felt my face burn. 15 years of study, specialization in clinical nursing, hundreds of lives saved, and he thought I should be a babysitter on my rest days. Not that there's anything wrong with that profession. My own mother was a babysitter for years. But the devaluation of my work, my diploma, my career built with so much effort, was evident. The conversation ended with him leaving to meet friends, while I sat there at the kitchen table with a lump in my throat and a feeling that something was deeply wrong in our marriage. It wasn't just about money or work. It was about respect, about partnership, about seeing the other as an equal. I spent the night sleepless, turning that conversation over in my head. I could have confronted Mark, could have demanded more respect, but something inside me was changing. A small seed of distrust had been planted. The next day, against all my instincts, I started looking for a second job, not because I agreed with Mark, but because I needed a way out. Any way out of that situation. And extra money meant more independence. Something I was beginning to realize I desperately needed. I sent resumes to various private clinics, had a few interviews. A week later, I received an offer from Bella Vista Clinic, a high-end aesthetic center that was looking for a nurse for cosmetic procedures. The salary was good, better than I expected. The hours were flexible, 3 afternoons a week after my shift at the hospital. I started immediately. The work was less stressful than at the hospital. Nobody was dying because of a poorly done facial filler, but it was demanding in other ways. The clients were rich, demanding, sometimes rude. I learned to smile in the face of malicious comments about my appearance or age. "You should try our wrinkle treatment," said a 60-year-old lady, all stretched out by plastic surgeries. Mark was satisfied with my initiative. "See? It wasn't that hard," he said, as if he were talking to a child who finally learned to tie their shoes. "With this extra money, we'll soon be buying our beach house." The following months were a blur of double shifts, poorly slept nights, and an increasingly distant relationship. I would leave the house at 6 in the morning for the hospital, work until 3 in the afternoon, go straight to the clinic until 8 at night, and arrive home exhausted only to find the house empty. Mark continued with his frequent trips, always returning with some expensive gift to compensate for his absence. Imported perfumes, designer bags, jewelry, gifts that seemed more like bribes to keep my silence and acceptance. I started saving part of the money I earned at the clinic. Not much, just enough not to raise suspicions in Mark's meticulous spreadsheets. $50 here, $100 there. I hid it in an empty laundry detergent box at the bottom of the laundry room cabinet, a place Mark would never visit since domestic chores were not part of his universe. It was during one of these trips that the first sign appeared. Mark forgot his phone charging in the bedroom outlet when he left for the airport. I was never one to go through his things, but when the device vibrated insistently, I ended up looking at the screen reflexively. "Love, I already miss you. I can't wait for you to arrive. The kids are anxious." The message was there, clear as day, from someone identified as Patricia Work. Kids? What kids would those be? Mark and I never had children. Not for lack of trying. In the early years of marriage, we dreamed of a large family. We did treatments, consultations with specialists. The doctors never found a specific reason, just that vague diagnosis of unexplained infertility. Over time, the subject was set aside, especially when Mark's career took off and the trips began. My heart raced. My hands trembled as I held the phone, reading and rereading that message. I unlocked the device. I knew the password. It was the date of our wedding, ironic, and looked for more messages from this Patricia. It was an extensive conversation with months of daily messages, weekend plans, discussions about the children's school, bills to pay, an entire life documented in conversations that should never have existed. "I'll try to stay until Tuesday this time. I told Emily I have important meetings. The kids will be happy." Jason had a presentation at school yesterday and kept asking when Daddy is coming back. The pediatrician said Lily's fever has passed, but we need to keep an eye on her. I bought the medicine he recommended. "I love you so much. Thank you for making our family so happy." I read everything with a sense of unreality, as if I were reading a script for a bad movie, not the story of my own life crumbling before my eyes. There were photos too. Mark embracing a brunette woman, younger than me. Mark holding a boy of about 8 years old in his arms. Mark at a children's birthday party, blowing out candles next to a girl who was his female doppelganger. At that moment, something broke inside me. It wasn't just anger or sadness. It was as if a switch had been flipped, triggering a survival mechanism I didn't even know I possessed. I quickly photographed all the evidence with my own phone, returning his device exactly as it was. Then I sat on the edge of the bed, breathing deeply, organizing my thoughts. I wouldn't confront him yet. I needed more information. When Mark returned from that trip, I acted normally. I prepared his favorite dinner, asked about work, smiled at the right moments. Inside, I was dead. Every word of his sounded like a lie. Every gesture of affection seemed an even greater betrayal. "How was the trip?" I asked casually, while he savored the risotto I had prepared. Exhausting. Los Angeles is impossible to drive in, and the client was difficult. Demanding. Los Angeles. He didn't even bother to create elaborate stories. He simply lied about being in the city where we lived. "It's good to have you back," I replied with a rehearsed smile. "I missed you." The next day, I used part of the money I had been secretly saving to hire a private detective. Paul was an ex-cop who now worked investigating cases of infidelity. When I told him my situation, he didn't seem surprised. "Unfortunately, it's more common than you imagine, ma'am. I'll need the details of his next trips." I provided all the information: dates, supposed destinations, flight times. Paul began his work immediately. During the following weeks, I lived a double life. During the day, I was the dedicated nurse, the attentive wife, the professional who applied Botox to rich ladies. At night, in the solitude of my room, while Mark snored beside me, I reviewed the messages I had photographed, analyzed bank statements, looked for clues I had ignored for years. How was I so blind? The signs were there. The trips that increased in frequency and duration, the growing emotional distance, the cell phone that never left his hands, the calls answered in private. And that rush to make me work more, earn more? Was it to support 2 families? 2 weeks later, I received a thick envelope at my office in the aesthetic clinic. Inside was a detailed report with photos, addresses, and information that confirmed my worst fears. Mark not only had an affair, he had a complete second family in Denver, a house in a gated community, a wife, who was not legally his wife, I discovered later, and 2 children, Jason 8 and Lily 6. A parallel life perfectly constructed and maintained for years. The business trips were, in fact, alternate weeks in which he lived with this other family. This Patricia believed that Mark worked in Los Angeles, where we lived, and needed to divide himself between the 2 cities because of his job. The detective had even managed to get copies of separate bank accounts that Mark maintained, from which payments for the children's school, house installments, regular bills came out, an entire life organized and financed. While at home, he pressured me to work more, to save more. 2 lives, 2 houses, 2 women who believed they were the only one. That night, I cried until I had no more tears. They gave way to a cold, calculated resolution. I would not be the betrayed wife who makes a scene. I would not beg for explanations or forgiveness. He didn't even deserve my anger. What Mark deserved was exactly what he was about to receive, the same level of deception that he had provided me for years. My plan would not be to confront him in a dramatic scandal. No, I wanted something more sophisticated, something that would hit him where it really hurt, in his meticulous control over everything and everyone. First, I opened a secret bank account at another bank. I started transferring small amounts from my salary there, values that wouldn't be missed in the budget that Mark religiously controlled. Over time, this amount increased. I discovered that Mark wasn't checking my transactions as closely as I imagined, perhaps too busy with his other family. Then, I sought a lawyer specializing in divorce. Mr. Davis listened to me with attention and compassion, something I hadn't received in years from my own husband. "What exactly do you want from this process, Emily?" "I want what is rightfully mine, and I want it to be quick and discreet." Mr. Davis explained to me about the division of assets, alimony, and how we could use the evidence of infidelity as a trump card if Mark made the process difficult. "I don't want anything beyond what I contributed to build," I explained. "Nothing from his family's inheritance. Nothing from the assets he acquired alone. I just want what's fair." "Do you have somewhere to stay when you decide to leave home?" That was an important question. I started discreetly looking for apartments to rent. I found a small studio near the hospital, perfect for starting over. I paid 3 months' rent in advance and started transferring, little by little, in small boxes, personal items that wouldn't be immediately missed at home. First were some clothes I rarely wore. Then, books and mementos from my family, photo albums from before the marriage, important documents. Each item carefully selected and transferred during the periods when Mark was traveling. Meanwhile, I continued working both jobs, as if nothing had changed. Mark was more absent than ever, and when he was home, we barely talked. It was as if we were 2 strangers sharing the same space. We would have dinner in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. Sometimes I caught myself wondering if he was thinking about the other family, about the children we never had. "I'm worried about you, Emily," he commented one night while I was preparing dinner. "You seem distant." The irony of the situation almost made me laugh. He, worried about my distance, while maintaining a secret life hundreds of miles away. "I'm tired, Mark. 2 jobs?" He nodded, satisfied with the explanation. "This sacrifice will be worth it. Soon we'll be able to buy that beach house." "Yes, the beach house," I replied mechanically, thinking about how that dream no longer meant absolutely anything to me. The beach house was a future that would never come, an empty promise to justify sacrifices that benefited only him. The plan was almost complete. I just needed the right moment to execute it. The opportunity came when Mark announced a longer trip than usual. "I'll need to be away for 10 days this time. Big project with international clients." 10 days with the other family was what that meant. Perfect for my purposes. All right, love, I'll miss you, I replied in an Oscar-worthy performance. On the EEF's day of his departure, I kissed him at the door as I always did. Have a good trip, come back to me soon. As soon as his car disappeared around the corner, I put my own plan into action. First, I transferred all the money from our joint account to my new account, leaving only enough not to raise immediate suspicions if he checked online. It wasn't theft. Half of that money was the fruit of my work, the result of my hours of dedication and sacrifice. Then I called Mr. Davis, confirming it was time to file for divorce. He already had all the documents prepared, including evidence of infidelity and bigamy collected by the detective. Next, I called a moving truck that I had previously arranged. In a few hours, all the furniture and belongings that were exclusively mine were transferred to my new apartment. I left behind clothes I no longer wore, objects without sentimental value, and of course, all the expensive gifts that Mark had given me over the years to appease his guilt. While the movers took my things, I walked through that house for the last time. So many memories, so many years. In the bedroom we shared, I stopped in front of the dresser where I kept my pajamas. There, Mark had hidden a pair of earrings he planned to give me for my birthday years ago. I had pretended to be surprised when I received them. In the kitchen, where I prepared so many meals waiting for him to return from his trips. In the living room, where we watched movies cuddled up in the early years of marriage. In each room, memories of a life I believed to be true. Before leaving, I left 3 envelopes on the dining table. The first contained the divorce petition, already filed in court. The second brought copies of all the evidence of his infidelity, photos, messages, the detective's report, all meticulously organized. The third envelope was addressed to Patricia. In it, I placed a letter explaining who I was, how long I had been married to Mark, and copies of our marriage certificate and other documents proving our relationship. I didn't do it out of revenge against her. As far as I knew, Patricia was as much a victim as I was in this story. I did it because she deserved to know the truth. This third envelope I didn't leave on the table. I took my car and drove to Denver that same night. 6 hours on the road with only my own reflections as a company. When I arrived, it was already dawn. I parked in front of the house where my husband lived his other life and put the envelope in the mailbox. For a moment I stood there, looking at the house. A beautiful building, larger than our apartment in Los Angeles, well-kept garden, children's swing in the yard. I thought about the children sleeping inside, innocent in this whole story. I felt a lump in my throat thinking about how much their lives would also be affected by Mark's lie. I returned to Los Angeles and to my new apartment, small but cozy. In the following days, I dedicated myself to organizing my new space and my new life. I quit my job at the aesthetic clinic. I no longer needed 2 jobs now that I was alone. I changed my hours at the hospital to the day shift, something I always wanted but couldn't do because of Mark's demands. I started attending a support group for women going through divorce, where I found understanding and friendship. On the 7th day of Mark's trip, I received a flood of calls and messages from him, all desperate, alternating between pleas and threats. Emily, please call me. We need to talk. What you did is illegal. You can't just take our money. I can explain everything. It's not what you're thinking. If you don't answer me, I'll call the police. Emily, for God's sake, where are you? I'm worried. Think about what you're doing. We can still fix this. 15 years of marriage thrown away over a misunderstanding. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I forwarded them, all to Mr. Davis, who took over communication from then on. Mark was in a panic, alternating between legal threats and declarations of eternal love. Mr. Davis remained firm, communicating only the legal procedures of the divorce. 2 days later, I received a message from an unknown number. Hi, Emily. This is Patricia. Can we talk? I agreed to meet her at a neutral cafe halfway between our cities. I arrived first and saw her enter, prettier in person than in the photos, with deep circles under her eyes of someone who hadn't slept in days. Thank you for coming, she said, sitting across from me. Our conversation was surprisingly civilized. We exchanged stories, filled in gaps, laughed nervously at the absurd coincidences that Mark created to keep his 2 lives functioning. He told me your mother died 3 times, Patricia commented. Always when he needed an excuse to stay longer in Los Angeles. For me, it was his father who had recurring health problems, I replied. He told me you were an obsessive ex-girlfriend who wouldn't leave him alone, she continued. That you were emotionally unstable and that's why he maintained contact to help you. And I didn't even know you existed. Or the children. Patricia held my hand across the table. The children? Jason is so much like him. And Lily, well, I felt a tightness in my chest. How are they dealing with all of this? They're still confused. They think their father had to travel for work. I don't know how to tell them the truth. At the end of the meeting, Patricia held my hand again. Thank you for telling me the truth. You could have simply disappeared from his life without caring about me and the children. The children are not to blame for anything, I replied. And neither are we. We said goodbye with an awkward hug, 2 women united by the same deception, by the same pain. I promised to send news, offer support if she needed it. After all, we were both starting over from scratch. I discovered later, through Mr. Davis, that Patricia also left Mark. Apparently, he returned to the house in Denver only to find it empty, just as happened in Los Angeles. Two carefully constructed lives, crumbling simultaneously. The divorce was finalized in record time, thanks to the evidence of infidelity. Mark didn't contest anything, probably trying to avoid the case being further exposed. He lost not only two families, but also his reputation at the company. A man who lived on lies, now exposed in his true nature. Today, a year later, my life is completely different. I continue working as a nurse, but now in just one job with more flexible hours. I have time to take care of myself, to visit my family, to take yoga and cooking classes. Simple things I had forgotten I enjoyed. I still occasionally receive messages from Mark. In the last one, he was saying he was sorry, that he realized how much he loved me and that he wanted a second chance, that he had made the biggest mistake of his life and would be willing to do anything to win me back. I didn't respond. Tonight, I'll go to bed in my own bed, in my apartment, surrounded by the things I chose, by the dreams I'm rebuilding. I'll fall asleep in peace, knowing that tomorrow I'll be a little stronger, a little wiser, a little more myself. And that, more than anything else, is the greatest revenge I could have. And you, if you were in her place, what would you do differently? Leave your comment.